Hey guys, welcome to Alienation. I hope you're all having an amazing day so far. If you are new here, hi, my name is Megan. And every single Sunday I sit down and talk about some form of weird and not so wonderful topic that really interests me. But today a lot of you will be happy because I am getting back into some true crime cases. But today is a little bit different because I'm going to be covering my first unsolved true crime case, and I'm not sure how I feel about this, if I'm being completely honest. So far I have only covered solved ones. I think it's because I really like the closure. I like knowing that some justice has been served and we know what happened to these people, because they're always such heartbreaking cases, and when it comes to unsolved ones it just really frustrates me. There is, like I said, no closure, no justice, and normally so many things go wrong with these sort of cases, and it doesn't make sense, and it really angers me when there is no resolve to a case. But I am going to be covering one today because when I came across this case, there was one, barely any information about it, and two, there's just no answers, and that makes me so sad. And it's not a very big case at all. Similar to Nottingham's first serial killer, the case I covered the other week, there's just barely any information on it, and no one's talked about it. It's not a known thing, and that's so sad. But anyway, today I'm going to be talking about the Pauline Robin, I want to say Burgette, it could be Burgett, but I'm going to say Burgette, I could be wrong, but the Pauline Robin Burgette case. And like I said, there isn't much information on this in the slightest, so I tried my best, but I'm sorry if this is quite a vague episode. It is quite sad, like a lot of the true crime cases, and there are some touchy little topics in there, so very quickly, here is my little disclaimer. Warning, today's episode contains contents and descriptions that some audience members may find disturbing, so viewer and listener discretion is advised. So we're going to get straight into it. I'm going to talk a little bit about Pauline's background. However, in a lot of the research, I did find that people were referring to her as Robin, so if I say Pauline or if I say Robin, just know I'm talking about the same person. Guys, so for those of you who are watching, if anything has changed, any angle has changed, I am so sorry. Hopefully those of you who are listening, it's not changed too much, but we just had a power cut, so it's all going very well so far. I'm really struggling right now with filming, but we're going to power through, so if anything's changed, I'm so sorry. Power's back on, let's keep going. I don't know whether or not I said, but Robin was born on the 23rd of February 1962 in Arizona in the USA. But jumping forward into the future, our crime actually took place in 1978, and at the time she was just 16 years old. Robin was known to be a very outgoing girl. She loved the outdoors as well. She just loved life. Overall, she was a very happy teenage girl. She had a younger brother named Chad, and he did mention that she loved being barefoot. She hated walking around wearing shoes, so she'd love to just run around outside without her shoes on. She lived for the summer, she loved hot weather, and she really enjoyed going horseback riding at St. Mountain, and also enjoyed spending her time swimming at the, I cannot pronounce this, Saguaro, I think that might be right. I'm so sorry if it's wrong, but she really enjoyed heading to the lake there and swimming there on the weekends. And this is really sad, but her brother Chad considered her not to be just her sister, but also a friend as well. They had a really close relationship. So the family didn't have a lot of money. They did live a low income life, and as far as I'm aware, her dad wasn't in the picture. If that is wrong, I'm so sorry. From what I know, it was Pauline, her mum Carol, and her brother Chad who all lived together. And even though they didn't have a lot of money, it didn't affect their happiness at all, and they were still a very close, loving family. They got on really well, and no one really had any complaints. However, at the time, Pauline had actually dropped out of high school. I don't know the 100% reason behind this, but from what I could find, it was so she could have more of a social life. And there was a specific source that did say that she had quite a few boyfriends. She would sometimes have a few going on at the same time. She had plenty of ex-boyfriends, all since she had dropped out of high school. You do you, that's completely fine. I'm not judging in the slightest. It is just a point that needs to be mentioned for certain reasons that will come out later on in the case. So she was a happy girl, she seemed very well liked, she wasn't currently in school at the time, and she had quite a few boyfriends and ex-boyfriends, but had a good family life. Does that make sense? Yep. Even though she dropped out of school to potentially have this social life, she obviously needed to fill her time with other things, so Pauline actually had quite a few babysitting jobs, and all of these jobs took place in the same apartment complex. As far as I'm aware, it was really close to where she lived, or it was attached to where she lives, I'm not too sure, but regardless, they were all within this same apartment complex. So we are going to jump to the weekend that this unfortunate incident took place, and that is the weekend of Friday the 10th of March 1978. It is a little bit unclear as to what specific date her mum and her brother did go away, but it's either Friday the 10th or Saturday the 11th of March. But her mum, Carol, was going on an out-of-town visit, and she actually chose to take Chad with her. Chad was only 11 years old at the time, so he's a little bit younger. Robin was 16, like I mentioned, so she was kind of more trusted to be left alone at home, but she had other other things to do. She didn't really want to be babysitting her younger brother, even though they were very close. So Carol took Chad with her, and she'd made arrangements for Robin to stay with some of her friends that weekend, just so she wasn't by herself. So on Saturday, March the 11th, Robin was seen by a bunch of her different friends, because like I said, she was due to be staying with one of those friends that weekend. She'd been seen by her neighbours, she'd been seen by her friends' neighbours, and she was just getting on with her normal teenage life, hanging out with her friends, all of that jazz. However, around 8 p.m. that night, Robin chose to leave her friend's house. She told her friends that she was planning on meeting up with her boyfriend. So one of these specific boyfriends at the time, I'm not sure if she only had one at the time or a few at the time, but she had told them she was meeting up with her boyfriend. So it's believed that she might have invited him to her actual house to have dinner with him there. But sadly, we have no idea if she did ever end up meeting up with him. And as she left, well, I'm not sure if it was a party, but as she left her friend's house and left being with her friends, that was the last time that anyone would see Robin alive. So jumping forward to the next day, so March the 12th, it is the Sunday of that weekend, and Carol and Chad are heading back to Arizona, and this is at around 5 p.m. So they arrived at home, and Chad ran into the house first to see his sister, just sort of say hi. There are a few reports that said that he wanted to warn his sister, like, just a heads up, we're home, in case the house was a bit of a mess. But either way, as he approached the door, he realised it was ajar, which is a little bit unusual for his 16-year-old sister to be leaving the door open. He called out his sister's name, but he got no answer from Robin. So he started searching around the house to find out where she was. She could have just been taking a nap somewhere, but he couldn't find her. So finally, he went into his sister's room. And sadly, this is where Chad came across a terrifying scene. So there in her room, in her bed, was Pauline's lifeless body. He was only 11 years old. Like, my God, that's horrific. I can't even imagine that. But Pauline had obviously been murdered, and the scene was not pretty. So like I mentioned at the start, there isn't much information about this case, so it is a little bit vague, but this is a rough description of what Pauline basically went through and the injuries that she received. She had been hit with some form of object, meaning she had suffered some kind of blunt force trauma. We are unsure as to what sort of weapon was used, and we are also unsure as to where this trauma was. I don't want to presume certain things in cases, but probably presume it was on her head to maybe render her unconscious. And then on top of that, she had also been stabbed multiple times too. Again, we're unsure as to whereabouts in her body she had been stabbed and as to what sort of knife or object was used. We'll get into this a little bit more coming up, but the police unfortunately were also led to believe that she had also been sexually assaulted. Just horrific for a 16-year-old to go through. It's horrific for anyone to go through, but she's a child at the end of the day. She's a teenager. It's so sad, that poor family. So looking at the crime scene, unfortunately, there was just not much to go off in the slightest. This was in the 70s, so forensics wasn't really a big thing then, so it just wasn't an easy case to figure out in the slightest. So Detective Clark Schwarzkopf, I'm just going to call him Clark, was assigned to this case. So it was up to him to try and figure out what on earth had happened to poor Robin. Going back, remembering that the door was slightly ajar, the police obviously took note of that, and they realised that there was no other signs of forced entry into their apartment. So this led them to believe that it was quite possible that Robin knew her attacker and that she even may have invited them in. See, this theory bugs me a little bit. I completely understand it, don't get me wrong, but for example, so say I'm upstairs or whatever, I'm in some other part of my house that's not near the front door, and I'm distracted or whatever, and I accidentally have forgotten to lock my door. That never happens. I'm a paranoid little bitch. It's always locked. But anyway, say I haven't. Anyone can easily just sneak into your house. Like, if it's open, they just open it and walk in. So why do they always presume, because they haven't broken in or forced their way in, smashed up some shit, etc., why do they presume that the victims suddenly know their attackers personally? Like, I don't get it. It always baffles me this so much, like so much. Like, the door wasn't broken down, so they had to know the person, they had to have let them in. Not really, no. I don't think they have to. Sorry, but I understand if someone tried to force their way in, you're then trying to get them out. I get there might be a sign of a struggle, but if you're not by the front door, say you've got music on and you've not locked it, someone could easily just walk in and then walk out. Like, it's not that hard. So lock your doors, people. But yeah, that was a weird tangent, but that theory really annoys me. She might not have known her attacker. I'm just saying, okay? It might be to do with the specific way that her door latch works. I don't really know, but not a lot of houses have latches, so yeah, either way. Detective Clark believes that there also may have been more than one person responsible for her murder. Robin, from what I can gather, she loved life. I don't think she would have wanted to die. She probably would have put up a fight. So it wouldn't have surprised me in the slightest if there was 2 people responsible for this. But anyway, like I mentioned, the evidence in this case is very, very sparse. However, the police were actually able to extract at least one full DNA profile from forensic evidence that they had gathered from the crime scene, which for the time is incredible. So that was pretty much all they had to go off. They had some form of DNA evidence. Whether or not they could use that to figure out who it belonged to at the time, I doubt it very much, because they would have done, but they just thought, no sign of forced entrance, she must have known her attacker, and this is what physically happened to her. That's all they had, which is nothing to go off in the slightest. So did they have any suspects or any form of lead? She was known to potentially have 2 or even 3 boyfriends at one time, so instantly they thought, well, that could be a lead. So sure, she was young, teenagers have crazy hormones going on. The police considered that one of those boyfriends, or maybe even an ex-boyfriend, might have been involved. So that is one route they looked down, or I presume that they looked down. Could it have been a crazy ex? Could it have been severe jealousy going on? We don't really know. Another theory that the police had is a bizarre one, and I have some opinions on this. We mentioned that she had a bunch of these babysitting jobs in that apartment that was kind of near her own home, and apparently, like, wait for this is crazy, Robin had been receiving some threats from some people that lived in this apartment complex. Bear in mind, Robin's 16, okay? In my opinion, I get it, you're a teenager, but you're a child. You are still a child. You are still young. She was receiving threats from either one woman in particular, or even multiple women from this apartment complex that she worked in, because of some really interesting claims. So there were plenty of claims that some of these married men, or even older men compared to Robin, from these families that she was like babysitting for, these guys had been apparently hitting on Robin, or like coming onto her, you know, like trying it on with her, flirting with her, etc. Which obviously means it's Robin's fault, obviously. So these women who had families and children were blaming a child for their husband's behaviour. That's right, always blame the girl, always blame the underage young girl. So apparently these wives or partners or whoever had found out about this weird behaviour and blamed Robin, and they were then threatening Robin. I'm sorry, but if your grown-ass adult male husband or partner or whatever is hitting on a fucking child, it is not her fault. I don't give a shit. I don't give a flying monkey fart if she's super flirty or whatever. I really don't care. She's 16, and chances are if you are hiring her to look after your children, you're going to know how young she is. So you better check the grown-ass men in your life and stop checking the child, because that is just disgusting. Like, it really baffles me. It really, really does. So that was one lead that the police had. So there was apparently an unidentified female, she is still unidentified to this day, who had specifically been threatening and targeting Robin and telling her not to come back to the apartment. So that's a bit weird, isn't it? I really can't wrap my head around that. I'm sorry. I am a very chilled person when it comes to relationships, so this sort of stuff absolutely baffles me. But imagine your grown-ass husband hitting on a child like an absolute nonce, trying it on with her, and then you blaming the child. You got some issues there, hon, haven't you? Sorry, I'm getting a little bit heated over this because it really bothers me. If you are in a situation like that, check yourself, check your partner, leave the child alone, okay? So anyway, there is no public information whatsoever about this person. Like I said, she is currently unidentified. If she is still out there, I want to ask her personally what's going on. Like, that's weird behaviour, gal. And we also don't know if she was questioned at any point, but it wouldn't surprise me if they had. That is usually a lead that they would follow up on. And if they didn't, that's a little bit silly. That's a little bit silly. That should be followed up on, because it's questionable. And then finally, the other lead that they had was this potential DNA evidence. So they were able to collect some samples from the scene, like I did say, but using DNA evidence at the time, it just wasn't really a thing. Technology wasn't advanced. They could only look into it so far, if that makes sense. But anyway, since then it has been looked into, and this was quite recently actually, and they were able to determine that at least 2 people were present when she was murdered. So Detective Clark did explain that even though it was good to have the DNA, it isn't much use unless they can match it against a suspect or suspects. It seems how this happened quite a while ago. Yeah, they're obviously trying to find someone to match it against. And from what I'm aware, unless they have specific DNA already on file, it's really hard to sort of trace and match it unless you have that physical person there. Yeah, it's quite complicated, but regardless, it's good to have that evidence, but there is only so much they can do with it. So I did find this little snippet while doing my research, and I do want to read it out because it is quite a good point. But it just said, keep in mind the police definitely would have checked the DNA profiles against Robin's then boyfriend, her known ex-boyfriends, and the creepy guy who harassed Robin while she was babysitting. So if Robin was indeed murdered by someone known to her, the odds are high that person was more of an acquaintance and is yet to be on the police's radar. So kind of like I said, they had to have someone to match it against, so they probably would have matched it against the people they already knew or they already had on a suspect list. So they are presuming that maybe the killers aren't yet known to police. We don't really know because it's an unsolved case and there isn't much information yet that's been revealed to the public. So there are a few theories with this case, which kind of links back to if they had any suspects or any leads. So I'm going to quickly run through those, but the first one is just an unfortunate random killing. So it is really sad, but these things do happen. They're quite rare, but they do happen. So it could potentially have just been a really bad, unfortunate timing for Robin as to where she was. That is one theory. It is always an option. It's one of the least likely ones, but it is an option. So Detective Clark told the media that Robin's murder was notably brutal. Like I mentioned, it wasn't just a quick killing, it was assault, it was a brutal bludgeoning, it was stabbing, it was fueled by emotion, fueled by rage. And Detective Clark did say, quote, "Whoever committed the crime, this was a crime of anger and rage, and Robin knew her perpetrator," unquote. Which I do believe. That was a lot to put someone through for nothing. It probably was for nothing, which is really sad and frustrating, but I do believe that it was someone who was really angry, filled with rage, like he said, and committed this crime. The next theory is the boyfriend did it. She was supposed to have been meeting up with him, so did that happen? Did he show up? Did they argue? Did he kill her? We don't really know. So obviously we are waiting for the DNA evidence. I presume it has already been matched with him, but you never know. So similar to that, ex-boyfriend, a friend, or an acquaintance could have done it. People do weird shit, man, don't they? Like teenagers, they could have maybe been drunk. People kill people for nothing. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if like a random group of teenagers did it. I don't know, but that is one of the theories. And then the final theory is the apartment complex widows. But Detective Clark did also say, quote, "She had been brought back home early, and we know there were problems at the other complex with a gentleman making advances on her while she was babysitting there for the 3 weeks before her murder," unquote. This is so sad, but my heart really does go out to Chad, so her younger brother, because sadly 3 years after Robin's murder, Carol, their mother, actually stopped taking her insulin and died, which is absolutely heartbreaking. So Chad does believe that Robin's death was a big factor in this. Poor Chad. But Chad's now actually in his 50s, and he says that there's not a day that goes by where he doesn't remember the night where he found his sister. It's so sad. I can't even imagine it. I really can't. But Chad does feel that the person who did this has been free for long enough and that justice needs to be served and they need to pay for what they did. And he does still have hope that one day this justice will be served. And he is constantly pushing for this case to be resolved because it's been such a long time. They can't get away with it. It really frustrates me. I'd be the same. I would never give up. I would want answers and I would want to see these people fucking suffer. But there are so many advances in DNA technology constantly and forensic science that maybe soon the killers or the killer will be identified and then Chad will have some form of closure. Oh, I don't know, just some form of answer. He needs an answer. So what do I think? I don't really know with this case because there isn't much information. It is very vague at the minute. Not much has been released to the public in the slightest. I can't really make up a 100% opinion, but it wouldn't surprise me if either a weird, jealous ex had committed these crimes or even the Karen neighbours who clearly have a lot of fucking issues. So they could have possibly found out that their partner was sexually assaulting her. I don't really know. Maybe one of the guys from the apartment was sexually assaulting her, advancing on her and stuff, and one of the weird wives walked in and then took it out on her. It wouldn't surprise me. People are twisted that way, and that would explain 2 sets of DNA being found at the scene. I don't really know, but I still can't get over the fact that grown-ass middle-aged women take things like that out on kids instead of checking their husbands because they're like in denial. I don't know. It really, really, really messes with me. That is everything for today's case. I am really sorry. It is quite a vague one. There's just not much to go on. And it just absolutely breaks my heart that Pauline Robin there's just no justice that's been served for her. Her name needs to be known. This case needs to be solved. But if you do have any form of information about this case, even if you think it won't help or it's the smallest detail, you never know. It was a very long time ago, but people might have seen something, they might have remembered something. But if you do, please call the Phoenix Police Department on 602-262-6011. Or there is a company called Silent Witness that you can get in contact. They work on solving cases and putting together evidence. You can call them at 480-WITNESS, which is 948-6377, or 1-800-343-TIPS, which is 8477. Or if you're not from the States, just quickly do some Googling, and I'm sure a point of contact or somewhere where you can go and report this sort of thing will come up. But that would be brilliant if anyone could. Like, you never know. But thank you so much for joining me this week. Please let me know if you prefer solved or unsolved crimes. I think you know my opinion on the matter. I am more than happy to cover both though, because there are so many unsolved crimes that it just blows my mind that people never get answers, and it's so sad. But if you are watching on YouTube, thank you so much for watching. Please give it a massive thumbs up. Leave me a comment down below and subscribe if you are not. And if you are listening on podcast streaming services, thank you so much to you guys for listening. Please rate, review and share. Do whatever you can to help spread the word. And I will catch you guys in my next one. Bye!